We are 38 days away from Tennessee football. This is the Volatile Podcast, your weekly reminder that being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. I'm Mac Williams, and I'm joined by my good and only friend, Nick Duncan.
That's right.
Nick?
Don't you forget it, listeners. I am the bestest of friends.
My bestest Mitch.
The most loyal, a faithful remnant. Use whatever language you'd like to use.
That's right. No, Jeff has some farm excuse why he can't be here.
No.
Joe doesn't even really like us anymore, so that's just what it is. But we're going to be here.
We can say whatever we want about Joe right now because there's a 0% chance he'll listen to this episode.
Not only will he not be here, he won't listen to it. So,
right.
Joe, the Steelers suck. You have terrible takes about Lane Kiffin, and you're kind of a nerd. So there, I said it.
Everyone's been thinking it. Now it's been said.
Oh gosh. Anyways, no, Joe, I love you. Just kidding. Yeah, man. How are you doing though?
I'm doing well. My work just got busy, so I've been kind of out of the loop in the news cycle a little bit. But I've been trying to catch up today, and I'm excited to go through this episode. I think we got a lot of good stuff to talk about, and I'm still riding those summer vibes. We got 5 Saturdays before there's college football?
Yeah, something like it.
So it's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because that first weekend of football is August 29th, I believe.
Week 0.
August 29th.
I love
week
0 football.
Exactly a month from today, from right now we're recording because it's Wednesday night, July 29th. But that game, I'm interested in North Carolina TCU. I'm excited to see who. I like Bill Belichick. I have no problem with Bill Belichick. I think he's a great coach. I would love to see him actually be decent.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to watch him be bad, honestly.
Yeah. It is. It's like watching someone I don't want to say idolize, but it's like watching someone you really respect and care for, maybe like a grandpa, right? It's like watching their mental health deteriorate. It's just really sad because it's like you're not the person that I knew you to be,
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about Bill Belichick. So rest in peace, Grandpa.
Yeah, it's like watching Joe Biden campaign for president, something like that.
Yeah, but we took great joy in that. Oh gosh, yeah, Joe Biden as president, that is a joke within itself.
Full of zingers here, the Volatile Podcast. It is just better for college football if Bill Belichick's good, right?
Yeah.
It's just better. It's better for college football. The ACC's horrible.
Right, that's the thing.
There's nothing exciting about the ACC right now. What's the most exciting storyline in the ACC going into the season? Will Clemson make it back?
How fast does Mike get fired?
Yeah, how fast does Mike Norvell get fired?
Yeah. No, I mean Miami just needs some competition other than themselves, of course. But because obviously for those that don't remember, Miami lost to SMU with their ACC title hopes on the line last year, which was an embarrassing loss.
It was embarrassing.
So I mean, Miami just needs some competition. I would love to see North Carolina be good and provide another team that's actually competitive there.
The most interesting storyline in the ACC now I'm thinking about might be James Franklin at Virginia Tech. Maybe that's
that's definitely it. No, that's definitely it.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's it. That's for sure it. Yeah. Anyways, we're going to get into the latest news here with football. The biggest breaking news of today, well, I shouldn't say the biggest, probably the second biggest.
News. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, of today is that the Vols landed 3-star running back Asa Barnes from Westview High School in Martin, Tennessee.
No relation to Deacon Barnes. No relation.
No relation to Rick Barnes. And he picked Tennessee over Arkansas, Florida State, and Southern California, USC. So obviously, Nick, this is a big get in the sense that now you have 2 running backs in this class and you didn't get one last year.
That's right.
So that's big for that reason. Asa Barnes, 3-star, West Tennessee. None of that really does much for me.
Yeah, it's a decent offer list. It's not incredible. It's not horrible.
Right. Right.
It's like a guy, if you didn't have DGG, you'd be like, I guess this is okay. But I think the fact that you got DGG, you're just like, dang, man, we just really added to the depth, and we're feeling a lot better now about, the post Deshaun Bishop era. So
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this commitment doesn't happen if Xavion Hyder makes it to the class this past year.
no, that's true.
So I think that because we lost him, I think Asa Barnes felt like he would have at least some carries when DGG is resting, or God forbid he gets hurt, or something like that.
Sure.
So yeah, good news though. I mean, always need depth at running back, especially with our offense. I mean,
Yep.
we've seen, like assuming that the offense next year under a year two phase on is functional and working well, like we've seen it do under Josh Heupel. That means DGG's likely going to be on the field for 4 to 10 plays at a time, going very fast, and he probably is going to be rotated pretty frequently. I would imagine.
Those guys get gassed. I mean, they get gassed in this offense. I mean, how many times you've seen, Jalen Rod or Dylan Sampson saying like, "Please let me have an Harris in me," and so, and I mean, has running back been? Is this even arguable? I don't know. It seems obvious. Maybe I'm wrong. Like the best and most consistent and well coached position at Tennessee. I mean, maybe defensive line with Rodney Gardner, but I mean, the defensive line, even under Gardner and multiple coaching staffs, has had down years. But running backs have just been consistently producing under Heupel, and this feels like just the best class that he's had of running backs. And so I think it's just a lot of excitement for the future about we've basically been living on 3-star running backs, and they've been really good. And so I don't know, it's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think that's arguable. I mean, running back has been so deep for so many years now.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most surprising things, I guess, since Josh Heupel's taken over. I obviously, the misconception when he came in, I don't think this was really true with Tennessee fans, but in the national media at least, was that, he's kind of an air raid offense. And I think some Tennessee fans obviously thought that we were going to be passing a lot more than we do, just because that's what you associate with, spreading your having such wide splits and having receivers out as wide as you do. You kind of associate that with air raid offense. And obviously Josh Heupel runs the ball more than he passes. He really gets a lot of work out of his running backs. And I think that's been the biggest surprise of his time here, probably, aside from the way he was able to elevate guys like Jalen Hyatt or Hendon Hooker.
Sure.
The biggest surprise for a position group as a whole, I would say, has been how good and consistent and deep the running backs have been for the entire time he's been here.
And another thing, too, that I've appreciated about just the offensive scheme, even though it's spread out and they do throw it, of course, is that when they run the ball, they run it downhill. I don't know how many times under all the previous regimes you're trying to run the football to the edge, and you're like, why are we not just running the ball off tackle more, trying to get downhill? And it's just fun to watch guys get north and south, and they've just done that the whole time Heupel's been here. So good class. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of I guess to me, it's a little bittersweet, not with Asa Barnes specifically, but just the fact that you do feel so good about the talent that you're going to have on next year's team. And you just feel like this year can't even be something to really fully look. I mean, I'm looking forward to it in the sense that I get to watch Tennessee play football,
right,
but I'm not looking forward to it in the sense that I don't have high expectations, and
grueling schedule, freshman quarterback, it just feels.
Yeah. It would just be, even if it was we're likely going to be 8-4 or 9-3, even if you felt a game or two better, I think that would just help you feel like you have a better lead up to next season, and you get to see more growth. Because I mean, at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is if David Sanders has an amazing year this year, which we kind of need him to, because I would say that most people feel like David Sanders underperformed to his talent level last year. If he has an amazing year, I would not be surprised to see him get drafted high enough to leave Tennessee after this year.
Sure.
And so then it's well, now we got to replace some offensive line pieces. And then it just feels like next year at the position, at the wide receiver position, running back position, obviously quarterback position, a lot of your offensive kind of skill players, you're going to have a lot of talent. And it just feels like if we could have a little bit more security in this season, knowing that there's like a growth plan in place,
Yep.
you'd feel better about that next year. But
yeah, because I mean, unless Mike Matthews just absolutely goes off in a way that we haven't seen him do yet, you're going to have him and Braylon Staley back with this with these running backs
with a year two TK
with a
Keys,
sophomore quarterback that's hopefully got a season of improvement under his belt.
Yep.
Like everything looks good on paper for 27, but the grind is upon us. So
yeah, I mean 27. I mean, this is like it's playoff or bust in 27. It doesn't even matter what happens this year. Like 27, you have to make the playoff. The only exception to that would be if somehow, and I don't even think this is, well, it's not possible. Yeah, I mean, if you played for an SEC championship game and you lost and somehow you didn't make the playoff, there might be a scenario where it's like you're okay with the way the season turned out, even though you didn't make the playoffs. But you'd have to be in Atlanta for the SEC championship game, I think. That's the only other scenario.
In this day and age where it's not East-West anymore, it's just the best two teams. Like, is anyone making the SEC championship and not getting in the playoff? Like,
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, because I think you're necessarily, a two-loss team at worst. Like,
yeah, well, I think that's the exception, right? And like Josh Pate's talked about this some. It's very possible that in the coming years you're starting to see a 9-3 team in the SEC be the second best team because everybody just beats each other and like maybe
9-game schedule now. Like,
if the Big Ten keeps trending the way that it is, where it's been really good and better than the SEC, I would say on the field, it's possible that you have more Big Ten teams getting a bid and like your second best SEC team or third best SEC team, if they beat up on each other somehow, doesn't get in. Now that just feels crazy to say because it's so, it's not happened yet. It's never happened, but it could happen, I think, maybe. And so I don't know. The other bit of latest news here is that the NCAA, this came out today. That's July 29th on Wednesday. We're recording this. The NCAA is suspending Arion Carter for 2 games. And their reasoning here is that he received a free flight. At the time, it was free to him to the NFL pre-draft process. And whenever he decided that he was going to come back to Tennessee, the report says that Arion Carter did pay back the funding that was spent on this flight. $427 is what the flight costs. So he's paid that back because he obviously didn't go through with the process. The NCAA has announced they're suspending him for 2 games because of this. Nick, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that the NCAA is totally defunct and a worthless organization, particularly when it comes to college football, and that the SEC and the Big Ten both at their media days, as politically correct as they can, seem to be saying it's possible that they break away at some point and do their own thing if the NCAA can't shape up. And in the day of NIL, when everybody's making all this money and it's just flying all over the place, and a dude gets a flight for $400 that he pays back, that you would suspend a guy for 2 games, I think that Danny White and Josh Heupel should totally ignore this, especially in a season where, as you and I were talking about a minute ago, you're probably not making the college football playoff. You're probably, a 7-win football team. Like, I just think they should make a statement and be like, yeah, Arion Carter's not sitting out 2 games. Go ahead and rule us ineligible for these 2 games. Like, I think it's insane. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's a dumb rule. I think even if it is the rule technically, that someone should have enough common sense to say, this is a dumb rule and we're just not going to enforce it.
Yeah, the issue is it's enforcing the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like, everything's changed so much. This just seems like some kind of arbitrary, outdated law that they're choosing to enforce for reasons beyond comprehension.
Yeah. This is what's so annoying is like you have the NCAA in 2023 who allowed Michigan to be proved to be cheaters and still go ahead and win a national championship and face no repercussions for that at all. Now, Michigan fans will say like Harbaugh had to sit out some games, like whatever, like it's ridiculous. And yet they want to crack down on individual players who were going on good faith of like, hey, I'm trying to make it to the NFL, decided, you know what, I want to come back to college. The NCAA should be thankful that high profile players like Arion Carter are choosing to come back and play at their level. And the fact that they're going to crack,
and that he had the integrity to be like, oh, let me also reimburse for that flight.
Right. Like it's just so. I mean, you are harshly penalizing people who are trying to do the right thing. And you said you're and on the flip side, you're allowing people who are intentionally breaking the rules or bending the rules in a way that's not honorable, and you're allowing them to get away with whatever kind of cheating they want without any sort of like practical punishment. It's just ridiculous, man.
We got the Sorsby gambling stuff, and like this is what we choose to care about. Like,
yeah, it's just crazy, man. Like
it's straining at gnats and swallowing camels is what it is. Like it's crazy behavior. So
yeah,
I just think I think they should ignore it. I think they should come out and I think they should put out a statement with 2 sentences and be like, this is an insane rule. Arion did the right thing. He did nothing wrong. We're not making him serve any kind of suspension because of this.
Yeah. I mean, the NCAA truly is the NCAA, which is the National Collegiate Association against athletes. That's what they are.
That's right.
They hate athletes. They don't care about, trying to, like Chief was on here last week talking about like coaches' jobs being molding young men, right? Well, the NCAA doesn't care at all about the type of men, and by their choosing women, that come through their level of competition. They don't care at all about the type of people that they are, about the type of character that they have. They punish the good ones and they let the bad ones do whatever they want. It's like the stereotypical worst teacher in the classroom, the teacher that spends all their time focusing on the kids who are constantly breaking the rules, and the kids that are obedient and do their homework and try really hard to learn in class just get nothing in return because the teacher's constantly focused on the bad kids.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. The next bit of latest Vols news here is that the Vols are making a push for Ohio State commitment. 5-star edge David Jacobs. This guy is super highly touted. 5-star plus is technically what he is on 3, which is what DGG is also ranked. Nick, any thoughts on this?
Bring him on. I mean, what else is there to say? Like, please, it'd be incredible.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Find all the money, Danny White. That's why we put Pilot on the side of the stadium, so we could get guys like David Jacobs to come play in Knoxville. So let's just do it.
Yeah. Is it on the side of the stadium?
Yeah, bro. It says Neyland Stadium, preserved by Pilot Flying J on the side of the stadium.
Which side?
The side that faces the river, I think.
Like underneath the Jumbotron?
I think so.
Or on the Jumbotron?
No, I think it's on the brick.
Okay. Yeah, I remember it being on the field, but I don't remember it being there. But it's definitely not on the side that's, what is it, like Philip Fulmer Way or whatever that leads like down the hill straight to the stadium. It's definitely not there, and that's the side of the stadium I tend to see the most. So,
yeah, I'm feeling like maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
No, you might be right. When you said it, I was like, wait a second, is it really? I don't remember that, but I believe you.
I think so.
Google Images.
I think so. I'm literally on Google Images right now, but I'm not seeing it. So
okay, well, good. I hope it's not, but
yeah, I'd love to be wrong about that, but
yeah, I know the Food City logo is on the side of Thompson-Boling Arena now, which is also a bummer, but it's the day and age we live in, so I get it.
It's true.
Last bit of Vols news here for football related, football adjacent, is that Morgan Wallen betrayed us this week. The Volatile podcast spent time 3 weeks ago, I can't remember now, talking about how much we love Morgan Wallen, ranked top 10 songs, and the dude wore a Charles Woodson jersey at his concert at the Big House last week or earlier this week or whenever it was. What did you think about this?
I'm very sad about
it. I know, dude. It's affected me more than I want to admit on the podcast.
Totally agree. I'm very sad about it. I feel betrayed. I feel he should. He's just got. He should know better. I don't know how else to say it. He should just know better. Like, I get it. You're like an international star. You're playing in a stadium. I actually am. Some people probably wouldn't even go this far. I'm actually okay. Like, you can't wear like, and he's not done this, but like, you can't wear, like, you're a Tennessee fan, right? You can't wear Florida stuff. You can't wear Georgia stuff. Like, you're not wearing Vandy stuff, right?
Bama stuff.
I mean, probably no SEC
Kentucky
teams, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Like, and if so, like, very few.
Right.
But I get that, like, you're somewhere in a stadium that you might wear a hat for that team, or that you might wear a shirt or something. Like, at Michigan, like, obviously I hate Michigan, but like, I can understand that. But like, you cannot wear a Charles Woodson jersey. You cannot.
Yeah. Wear Tom Brady.
Sure.
Yeah, like Charles Woodson is like the antithesis of, like, that's probably the most hated Michigan player of all time as a Tennessee fan, right?
100%. It's not even close. Like, he's, and it's not.
Yeah,
I would say Charles Woodson is a top 10 hated player by Tennessee fans.
You think?
I think.
Wow. That's a take. I mean, I don't even think about Charles Woodson that much. I mean, obviously, when I think about that, but see, like, my frustration is more with the Heisman voters than it is Charles Woodson.
Okay, sure. But like, he's what represents that, you know?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree
at
all.
When like, I was telling somebody today, we were talking about it, and I was like, when someone mentions the words Heisman Trophy, Tennessee fans think Charles Woodson, Peyton Manning instantly.
That's true.
That's what you think of. Like, the most prestigious award in all of college football. This man represents it for us. You cannot go to a stadium and wear his jersey. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak, but I'm pretty sure Charles Woodson is the last strictly defensive player to have won the Heisman. Yeah. Now, obviously, Travis Hunter won a couple years ago, but he also played offense, which is why he won it.
Sure.
If he just played defense, he wouldn't have won it.
I mean, has anyone else even really been in the conversation? Like,
Manti Te'o is the closest that I can think of off the top of my head.
Tyrone Matthew, maybe?
Yeah, Tyrann Mathieu. Yeah.
Honey Badger.
Honey Badger. And then Ndamukong Suh, I think, was in the conversation as well.
Yeah.
But those are the only guys I can think of in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. He needs to do some kind of an apology tour for Tennessee fans.
Yeah. I mean, he's willing to come out and make a statement about the things he says and the things he does. Like, this deserves a statement at least. Just, like, give us a statement. Say, like, I regret my actions.
Yep.
Just
apologize to Vol Nation. I should have known better.
Just own it.
I shouldn't have worn a Charles Woodson jersey.
No. And what's frustrating for me, this is super personal, super anecdotal, but like, the listeners don't fully understand the amount of work I went through to convince Jeff Wright to listen to Morgan Wallen. Like, I spent so much time trying to convince him, like, hey, not only is this guy's music good, which is enough reason for you to listen to him, but he's also our guy. Like, he takes this seriously. He's a huge Vols fan. Like, he's not going to be Kenny Chesney, right? Like, that's a comparison. Like,
correct.
He's not going to be Kenny Chesney, who's just like kind of a Tennessee fan, or says he is, or says he was, and now he just wears every team's jersey, every concert, wherever he is.
Kenny Chesney totally lost Tennessee. Like, I was there. He totally lost Vol Nation when he wore a Florida hat. That was during like the Tebow years and all this stuff. And it's like, it's unforgivable. And this isn't that bad, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, would you be okay with, at a bare minimum, if he never does it again? Like, what if he never apologizes, but also never does it again?
I mean, probably eventually I'd be okay with it, but like, it's hard because like, you're always just going to wonder, like, the next time he goes on tour, I'm going to look at the tour cities first thing. I'm going to be like, okay, I'm putting this in my, like, I know that I care too much about this. Listeners are going to be like, this is ridiculous. The next time he goes on tour, I'll look up the cities where he's going. And if he's going anywhere where it's possible that he wears something inappropriate, I will put it in my calendar for that weekend to be like, check the news about Morgan Wallen and see what he wore.
Check Morgan's wardrobe.
Correct. Wardrobe check. We'll do it.
Yeah, it was a big loss for Morgan Wallen. It feels, I mean, truly, I don't want to overstate it, but it just feels like someone that you really trust and someone that you really care about doing something that you really didn't want them to do,
I
and that
mean,
just hurts.
the guy sings about like the Vols in East Tennessee in like 40% of his songs.
At least
Yeah,
generous.
maybe half. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just don't like. Would the fans that were there in Ann Arbor to hear him play? Would they have thought anything? Would they have had any less fun had he just not worn anything college football related? If he would, like, I think the
No,
concert would have gone the same.
totally agree. You probably have some diehard Michigan fans that would have left and been like, dude, it'd been awesome if Morgan would have wore a Michigan hat or something.
Yeah, but they probably would have said, like, but of course he wasn't going to do that. Like, they
Yeah,
probably would have. They had no
correct.
expectation for this at all. There was no precedent for it at all. He just
Right.
did it
Right.
for clout or for some reason.
And honestly, like he wore a basketball jersey the night before, like Chris Rice or something. I can't remember.
Who's Chris Rice? When you say Chris Rice is the Christian singer, the guy that smell the color 9. You remember that song?
Darn it.
Chris Leak? No, basketball.
No. Yeah, it's a basketball jersey.
A Michigan basketball jersey?
Yes. Glenn Rice. I hate myself.
Glenn Rice. I was like, Chris Rice, smell the color 9.
He wore a Glenn Rice basketball jersey on Friday night, and I think the Charles Woodson jersey was on Saturday night. And like, I didn't hear anything about the Glenn Rice jersey. And that's the thing. Like, do I love it? No, but like, I'm also like, okay, I get it. Like, you're a star. You're in Michigan. Like, we don't play Michigan. You know, it's not. You kind of hate Michigan just because they're like a blue blood Big Ten team. It's not like you play Michigan. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, like most years until the cheating, Tennessee fans are probably pulling for Michigan on the one game that matters to them when they play Ohio State.
The first time I ever cheered for Ohio State in the game is 2024.
Sure.
That was the first time I ever did.
Yep.
Or no, 2023. I did in 2023, and I have since then, to be honest.
Yeah, it'll probably be a while before it flips back, right? I mean, Emmanuel Ward is leaving, so maybe after that, you know, it'll get a little bit better. But yeah, anyways, that's probably enough said, but not happy about it.
So. Yeah, our listeners are probably like, stop talking about Morgan Wallen, but, you know, it's fine. Mom, it'll be fine. I'm like, just chill. All right. Any basketball news, Nick? I don't think so.
Final Four bust.
All right. Baseball. We should have talked about this last week. We didn't, just because we were sidetracked with our awesome guests. But Jake McCoy, who's left-hander from South Carolina, turned down his offer from the Blue Jays to return to I shouldn't say return, to play for Tennessee this season. He was on South Carolina's roster for the past 2 seasons. Did not play this past year because of injury, and was, going to see how it went in the draft, even though he didn't really play much this year. Still got drafted, which I think speaks to his ability. And he ended up not getting the contract, I guess, that he had hoped for. And so he's going to play at Tennessee this year. Nick, I told you before we started that I have a hot take about this.
Yeah.
So
I've been waiting for it.
Jake McCoy, like I already said, left-hander. Hard to describe any lefty as like a power pitcher. Like, the only lefty you think of as like a power pitcher is like Aroldis Chapman. Yeah. But Jake McCoy is I think is safely can be considered a power pitcher as a lefty. And I think with Jake McCoy's coming to Tennessee, and then obviously you're still going to have Landon Mack. You're obviously still going to have goodness gracious, other left-handed guy that pitched for us this year. What is his name? Anyways, I think here's my hot take. I think that Tennessee is going to have the best starting rotation in the country this season. That's the take.
Good grief! I hope you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I did see
Cam Appenzeller. Sorry, Cam Appenzeller.
Yeah, Cam Appenzeller, of course. D1 baseball, I saw ranked the top 25. I didn't know about this Jake McCoy news, so I don't know if he was in this. Probably he was, if this news broke a week ago. because probably 2 or 3 days ago I saw D1 baseball post like the top 25 recruiting classes for this year, and Tennessee was third on that list, I think.
Yeah.
The top 4 were all SEC teams. I think Vandy and LSU and Texas were the other 3. So
of course,
yeah.
And that's the thing, dude. When you're putting Tennessee baseball against Vandy, LSU, and Texas, you're never going to get the love you deserve from the national media. So if Tennessee is ranked third among those 4 teams, then what that tells me is Tennessee actually is probably the best, or it could be the best if they perform to their potential. And the national media just hates us.
Yeah, there's probably even if it's accurate at that level, there's probably not a lot of daylight between those classes, right? Like they're all probably about a wash. So
yeah.
I did also note that of the 16 SEC teams, 13 of them were in the top 25.
Yeah, the SEC is completely dominant in baseball right now. Obviously, we've won like 6 or 7 straight national championships in baseball. I mean, the SEC is just dominating baseball. This year was the most vulnerable the SEC's ever been, and a middling Oklahoma team in terms of how they were expected to do this season won the national championship. And
when the SEC was supposed to clean up, yeah,
right. I mean, North Carolina and Georgia Tech looked like the best 2 teams, and neither of them. North Carolina did not look like they wanted any part of Oklahoma in the national championship.
I mean, series. UCLA was all the talk all year, right? They flopped. I mean, do you want to guess the 3 teams that weren't in the top 25? I did not plan
from the SEC.
Yeah, that were not in the top 25 recruiting rankings for this year. Got to make sure, see if I can remember them off the top of my head.
Well, South Carolina is bad, but I feel like they probably get a bump just for their program. So I'm going to stay away from them.
Let's see if I can find this list real quick, actually, while you're thinking. I know I can remember. I can remember one of them for sure.
I'm gonna go Missouri. I'm gonna lock that in.
Missouri was definitely one of them.
Okay,
good pick.
I'm gonna go.
One of them I was shocked by. I'll tell you that. I won't give you any more.
Kentucky came to mind, but they've been pretty good as of late. I feel like they're probably in the top 25.
They are.
Okay. Man, this is tough. Again, South Carolina is not good, or they haven't been good. But I just feel like South Carolina is probably getting a bump because of their program as a whole. Let's see, not Vanderbilt, not Arkansas. No, I feel like I need to look at a list of the teams right now because I'm kind of blanking on them. Mississippi State's definitely going to be on there. Arkansas is definitely going to be on there. LSU, Ole Miss will definitely be on there. Auburn's probably on there. They're good. Missouri. Okay, I guess I'm gonna go South Carolina. South Carolina on there or no?
I do think South Carolina is one of the 3 that is not.
Dang it! Oh, okay, good. So I got Missouri, I got South Carolina, and for my last pick, I'm gonna go. Gosh, this is hard.
It is hard. I was pretty shocked that this team was not on it.
Okay, I guess I'll just go Kentucky. I'll go Kentucky.
It is not Kentucky. That's a good pick. It was Georgia.
No way.
It was Georgia.
Wow, they didn't even come to mind because of how good they were last year.
Of course. Why would they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is shocking. You already said Kentucky's on there, so that was kind of a dumb guess. But
did I say that? Did I say it? Oh, yeah.
You did. You told me, yeah. So that was a dumb guess. But yeah, I mean, Georgia, I guess that makes sense. I mean, Georgia traditionally is not a great baseball school. They had a good year. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be good again. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. But yeah, Missouri is easy. That was the easiest one. That was them and South Carolina were the first 2 teams came to mind in terms of teams that weren't very good.
Yeah, so. Those were good picks. Yeah, I don't know that anyone would pick Georgia for that. But yeah, I was pretty shocked.
Yeah. Well, Nick, the next thing we have here, so I've put together a list of the 10 most important players on Tennessee's roster for this season.
Okay.
I've ranked them in order from 10 to 1.
Okay.
So I'm going to read them to you randomly, and I want you to tell me which ones are like where I place them in the order. Okay, so you can start with whoever you want and tell me where they are.
You're just going to read them all to me to start.
I'm going to read them all to you to start, and obviously I can tell you, I can remind you of who they are.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the list of players I put together. Ethan Davis, TJ Metcalf, Mike Matthews, Faison Brandon, Arion Carter, Deshaun Bishop, David Sanders Jr., Jesse Perry, Ori Williams, and Xavier Gilliam.
Okay.
So you can start at 1 or 10, your choice. I don't care. Or you can jump around.
Okay. Let's go Faison Brandon number 1.
Faison Brandon, I have listed as the most important player on Tennessee's roster for 2026. Good guess.
Thank you. It's the most important position on the team.
Yeah.
And it's the most important position in sports.
Yes.
Okay. Number 2, let's go with David Sanders.
David Sanders is number 3.
Okay. Let's go. So then can I repick a 2? Is that how this works?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, pick whoever you want of that list.
Okay.
Do you want me to tell you who you have left again?
No, I'm going to go Deshaun Bishop number 2.
Deshaun Bishop is who I have at number 2. Now, I do think that David Sanders could
in my mind, Sanders was 2, Bishop was 3, so you got him flipped. That's probably right.
Yeah. The only reason I have him flipped, now I don't know if this is a good reason, but the only reason I have him flipped is not necessarily for on the field stuff. It's more just for like leadership locker room stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Deshaun Bishop, of course, his role is going to be extremely important on the team in terms of the amount of carries he's about to get for this season. But I just feel like Deshaun Bishop is the leader of the football team, frankly.
Sure.
And so that pushed him above David Sanders for me, though I would argue David Sanders' position objectively is probably the second most important on the team.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, give me, so I've got 7 left. Let me hear again. Let me hear some more names.
All right. So here's the 7 that you have not guessed. That is Ethan Davis, TJ Metcalf, Mike Matthews, Arion Carter, Jesse Perry, Ori Williams, and Xavier Gilliam.
Let's go with
I think I know what you're going to guess, and I think it's going to be wrong.
Okay. Let's go with Perry.
Oh, I thought you were going to guess Carter. The number 4 player. Well, do you want me to tell you Perry, or do you want to give him a guess again and just save it?
Yeah, let me guess again. Let's save Perry. Let me guess again. I'm going to go then.
I don't think you're going to get this one.
Really? Okay. Mike Matthews?
No, good guess. You want more? I'll give you one more guess. And I'll tell you who number 4
All right,
is.
give me one more.
Go with the most. Like I already gave you a hint. It's like I don't think you're going to get it.
Yeah. So it's someone. Yeah. So TJ Metcalf.
Good guess. That one's closer. The number 4 most important player I have on this team, and I think this is where the debate gets really hot, is Xavier Gilliam.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. The reason I put him at number 4 is because he is a edge rusher, defensive lineman, which I think we're going to need a lot of help from.
Yep.
And he's a Penn State transfer. He's the only Penn State transfer we have on the D line now. Since
Chaz.
What's his face? Yeah, Chaz, whatever. Coleman. Screw you. Anyways, I think Xavier Gilliam is going to be really important on this team. I think we're going to need him to not only perform well, but to help, put in the Jim Knowles defense and to be a leader in that sense. So I have him at number 4, which I think is not necessarily objectively true. That's just kind of how I process through it.
No.
What do you think about that?
I think that's a good pick because I think the defensive line is potentially the weakest part of the defensive unit. So if we're going to get to, if we are going to get to defensive players at number 4, then I think in my initial pick I would say Arion Carter, but I think the linebacker core is much deeper. So I think if you lose him, it's actually as good as Arion is and the leader of the defense, it's probably just less of a thing than if you lose a defensive lineman. So
right, exactly. That's exactly how I thought about it. And also, Arion Carter might not be playing 2 games. So
yeah, hopefully he is.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that's 4.
This is number 5. The 5 you have left again are Ethan Davis, TJ Metcalf, Mike Matthews, Arion Carter, Jesse Perry, Ori Williams.
Okay, I'm going to go Perry again.
No.
You've got him low. Okay.
I've got him lower than what you're guessing.
Forget Perry. So let me just go Arion Carter.
Good guess. He is. I'll go ahead and tell you. Arion Carter's number 6.
Okay,
I put one guy ahead of him.
One guy ahead of him. Dang.
You've already said his name.
Okay. Mike Matthews.
TJ Metcalf is who I have.
Dadgum. I almost said TJ Metcalf until you said you already said his name, which I've already said TJ Metcalf's name, but then I
went. Yeah. So TJ Metcalf, Arion Carter. That's 5 and 6. I'll go ahead and talk about both these guys. So I grouped all these defensive guys together unintentionally, but I guess my brain was just I had like who I think are clearly the most 3 important offensive players, and I think that obviously the offense is going to have to carry us. And maybe that's not even true, but it just feels like the offense has a lot of question marks, and the defense, even though they might not be as good as they can be this year, is going to be okay long term under Jim Knowles.
Yep.
And so I kind of end up grouping all these defensive guys together. TJ Metcalf above Arion Carter. What's the logic? The logic is, again, the linebacker room is so deep.
Yep.
And TJ Metcalf playing defensive back, I just feel like his role, being a Michigan transfer, being a guy who's got Power 4 experience, it is going to need to step in from day one and be really good. A guy that I left off this list along the same lines is the Auburn cornerback that transferred out. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Yeah.
He's a guy I also thought of but didn't crack my list just because we've been good enough at cornerback, and I just feel like with the linebacker core that you have, your defensive line and your defensive backs are going to play a more important role than cornerback for this season.
Sure.
So, yeah, TJ Metcalf at 5, Arion Carter at 6, probably the leader of the defense, important linebacker player. But, again, that room's just so deep. So I have those guys at 4, 5, and 6, Xavier Gilliam, TJ Metcalf, Arion Carter. So now we have 4 spots left, 7, 8, 9, 10, all offensive players that are left. So what you got is Ethan Davis, Mike Matthews, Jesse Perry, and Ori Williams. Who's number 7?
I'm not going to get these right. Jesse Perry.
Yeah, if you keep saying it, you're going to get it right. That's not correct.
It's got to be the O-line. Okay. Ethan Davis.
Good guess. No.
Mike Matthews.
Yes, Mike Matthews is the 7th most important player that I have on this list. The reason I went with Mike Matthews, so a lot of people are like, where's Braylon Staley? You're not even said his name. I think that Mike Matthews is a more important player for this offense for this season than Braylon Staley. I think Braylon Staley is a better player, but I think Mike Matthews is more important because he has more experience. You need him to step up and be a bigger role in this offense. I think that he needs to be a consistent target for Faison to go to. I think the wide receivers are going to be good. I mean, I'm not really worried about wide receiver. I know some people are. But I just feel like Mike Matthews has the highest ceiling and the least amount of potential that he's reached so far.
Yep.
So the gap from his ceiling to his current output is greater than any other receiver.
Yep.
And so I just feel like he needs to take the biggest step in the receiver core.
I actually agree. I wasn't freaked out by not hearing Braylon Staley's name because I don't think Braylon Staley will be near as good as he was this last year if Mike Matthews isn't better. Because it'll just be too easy to take Braylon out of the game. Like if you just have one guy, I mean, it's just in this day of football, it's just too easy to take one wide receiver away and not just let one guy beat you. So
Yep. All right, Nick, 3 left: Ethan Davis, Jesse Perry, Ori Williams. Who's number 8?
Ethan Davis.
Nick, what are you doing?
Jesse Perry.
It's Jesse Perry. It's Jesse Perry. Yes.
The first time I switch it up.
I know. Jesse Perry comes in at number 8. This is where I jump back to the O-line. I think there's an argument to say that Jesse Perry could be as high as 4 on this list. I would have
had him higher. I would have had him higher.
Okay, fair enough. I think Jesse Perry is the most important offensive lineman aside from David Sanders because Jesse Perry is the most versatile. And he obviously had a lot of good play last year, but he was inconsistent at times. And this year, you're going to have him be consistent. And I think the best version of this offensive line has Jesse Perry at right guard and Ori Williams at right tackle. So I need Jesse Perry to be good enough to lock down that guard spot and to be an everyday starter for all 12 games. I think he's the second most important lineman on the list.
Okay, I agree. Obviously, I agree because I kept picking him.
Where would you have had him on the list? Would you have had him at 4?
I would have had him at 4. I think I would have had him behind David Sanders. Yeah, I think that if Faison, I guess we should also say, or GMAC, Fun fact, I got my haircut in a random barbershop this week in Knoxville and was talking to the barber guys, for the listeners who didn't grow up in East Tennessee, like literally everyone's a Vol fan. Everyone talks about Tennessee football all the time. So I'm in this barbershop. There's like Vols memorabilia everywhere. We're talking about the season. And it wasn't the guy cutting my hair, but I was talking to this guy because he was cutting hair across from me. And this barber was saying that he thought GMAC was going to be the guy. So
really?
That's what he said.
Wow. Can I ask the skin tone of this individual cutting hair?
It was dark.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Tell him to stick with the boys, man. We're Faison. We're Team Faison over here.
He said you think you got to go with the guy that has had experience and been on the team and knows the playbook. He said he thought he would start the season but not finish it.
Okay, no offense to this man. That sounds like the worst possible idea I've ever heard. If Josh Heupel's looking at this team and thinking, GMAC's going to start, but Faison's going to finish the season, just play Faison.
I don't think he's thinking that that's what Heupel's thinking. I just think he's thinking that's the way it'll play out.
But if that's the way it'll play out, don't you think Heupel's aware that it could play out that way?
Well, you would hope so.
And if he's aware that it could play out that way, for the sake of argument, wouldn't you just go with the guy who's given you more, who's got more potential? Well,
sure, but like Jalen Hurts started for Alabama, but then Tua ended up coming in midway through the season.
Yeah, but I don't think that Nick Saban even thought that was really a possibility.
Maybe.
I mean, barring injury, I don't think Nick Saban was like, yeah, we're going to play Tua. Like, I think he was like, Tua's going to play next year.
You don't think it's possible that Heupel's like, no, I think it's GMAC's team. But then he gets 5 games in and he's like, this guy's horrible.
God, maybe I just – no, I'm going to say no. I don't think that's possible because Josh Heupel always goes with a guy that's more talented. He always does that. So, no, I don't think that's possible. I think he's going to look at these two guys, and unless GMAC is clearly better, he's going to go with Faison.
Okay. I agree.
I know. You're arguing this guy's point for the sake of arguing.
Yeah, I'm playing devil's advocate because it's really the first person that I heard argue this. So
yeah. What's this man's name? Do you have his name?
I don't have his name. No.
All right. Well, shout out to you, man. Welcome on the podcast anytime you want to argue your point.
Super nice guy. It was fun talking Vols football with him. So
I will be letting Jonathan Williams know at Veterans Barber Shop that you went somewhere else to get your haircut. So
I haven't gone to Veterans since I moved out of town. I mean, most listeners know I don't have much hair, so
it's an easy request when Nick goes in.
My wife usually cuts my hair, but we've been really busy, and I had a free hour, so I was like, I'm gonna go get somebody to buzz my head. So
he's like, hey, can I give you $10 to get that 2 guard over my head a few times, please?
A 2? That's too long. Give me the 1. Give me the
1. I'm old enough to remember when Nick had hair.
That's true. It wasn't that long ago, but alas, those days are behind me. All right, last 2 guys. I'm going.
You remember who they are?
Yeah, I'm going Ori Williams, Ethan Davis, 8-9.
9-10, but yes, that's correct.
Sorry, 9-10.
Ori Williams is at 9. Ethan Davis is at 10.
The Ethan Davis pick was just for Jeff Wright, wasn't it? That's solely for Jeff Wright.
It was definitely, it came to my mind that I wanted Ethan Davis to be on the top 10 most important players list because I knew Jeff would be scoffing at that as he listens to it.
However, the drop off from Ethan Davis to whoever else would play tight end is going to be colossal.
See Jason Witten in the all-time Vols player draft, So I mean, Deshaun Brame is I think okay.
It seems like he has talent,
Yeah, but so first, the reason Ori Williams is ahead of Ethan Davis, offensive line, You need Ori Williams to be strong at right tackle. We've had inconsistent tackle play over the last handful of years, I would say, and you need 2 strong tackles. The only reason Jesse Perry is above Ori Williams for me is because of his versatility and the fact that he's got more experience in the system.
Sure.
But I think Ori Williams is going to be a guy that you need to play really well this season. And we can't have another freaking what's-his-face that transferred to Kentucky where he can't even freaking run. I really need Ori Williams to play well. Ethan Davis, I was between Ethan Davis, Braylon Staley. I even thought about throwing in like Jeremiah Thielander or somebody like that.
Sure.
But to me, when you're thinking of Braylon Staley and you're thinking of Jeremiah Thielander, again, the linebacker room is hard just because it's so deep.
So deep
that it's like any of those guys could step up and be a great performer in any game. And I think that room is deep enough that you're not going to have a vitally important player outside of the best one, which is probably Arion.
I thought Ty Redmond might get on the list. He would have been towards the end for me, probably.
Yeah, Ty Redmond is definitely worthy of discussion as well. But yeah, Ethan Davis, I just feel like if Ethan Davis is not good, then Tennessee's offense is going to be missing something that it needs really badly.
There'll be no one to catch the ball in 12 personnel on the goal line.
Exactly.
He's bad.
Exactly. So I need Ethan Davis to be good. I think he's important. I genuinely believe, I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 offensive players ranked higher than Ethan Davis. I think that he's fringe top 5 of important offensive players this year. I don't think that's crazy.
I don't either. It's an important position on Josh Heupel's in his schemes. So
exactly,
it's like Fisher cut bait time for him, right? So
yeah. All right, Nick. So I'll give you mine again. You already said you would have Jesse Perry at 4. If you want to scramble the back half, just to let the listeners know what you would have. My top 10 again. This is in order. I'll go 1 to 10. Faison Brandon, Deshaun Bishop, David Sanders Jr., Xavier Gilliam, T.J. Metcalf, Arion Carter, Mike Matthews, Jesse Perry, Ori Williams, Ethan Davis. So you agreed with Faison at 1. Would you have David Sanders or Deshaun at 2?
I'd probably have David Sanders at 2 and Deshaun at 3. Yeah.
Okay. David Sanders at 2, Deshaun at 3. 4, you've already said Jesse Perry. You're sticking with that?
Yep, sticking with
it. Number 5, who would you put in that spot?
Probably I think you thought about Xavier Gilliam. I think he probably should be next. I don't know that I would have put him there because I don't think I would have thought through that the way that you did. I think I probably put Arion Carter next.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's reasonable. What about number 5 after Arion? Or no, sorry, number 6 after Arion.
6 after Arion, probably Mike Matthews.
Okay.
7. 7, let's go Another thing about Arion before I go to 7, another thing about Arion that I think is important that we didn't talk about when we talked about him is that they are also talking about bringing him off the edge some this year.
Right. Some position versatility again.
Yeah, because they obviously are going to need a little help on the edge, and so I think that's going to be important as well. 7, let's go Ori Williams.
Okay. And then 8, 9, 10, you've got T.J. Metcalf, Ethan Davis, and Mike Matthews. What order do you put them in?
Yeah, let's go T.J. Metcalf, Ethan Davis, and then it would be Xavier Gilliam for me.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Xavier Gilliam, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I think that's a solid list. I think you have a good argument. Again, this isn't this is not set in stone. I just kind of put this together. I literally wrote down the first 11 guys that came to mind, and then when I looked over the roster to make sure, I was like, yeah, I feel good about those 11. Nice. The 11th that I left off was Braylon Staley.
Sure.
Yeah. And then I just ordered them in what I thought was most important. I mean, honestly, the easiest pick was Faison. I think the top 3 were the easiest: Faison, Deshaun, and David Sanders in whatever order. And Faison, I think, is the clear number 1 just because of quarterback. So, that's the list.
His play is the difference in winning 6 games or 7 or 8 games, probably.
I mean, dude, I'm not. I have Tennessee at 7 and 5, and I'm going to stay there probably. I mean, maybe I'll get excited and pick them to win 8, but I really think that this team could win 9 games with Faison if he is as good as he can be as a freshman.
Sure.
He's going to throw bad picks. He's going to turn the ball over. He's going to make some dumb decisions. He's going to run out of bounds with the game on the line. But those things.
No, he's not. Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
Even with those things, he is a 9-win caliber quarterback as a freshman if he plays as good as possible with the mistakes he's also going to make. I just don't know that a guy with all the stuff that he has to learn and the inexperience can do enough to win 9 games in the SEC right now.
Sure.
I just feel like 7 is more realistic.
Especially with that schedule, right? Like
with the schedule.
It all comes back to that. There are SEC schedules where you could look at it and say, I feel pretty good about winning 8 or 9, even with the freshman quarterback. But like the one we have ain't it. So
yeah, I mean, if we played with this year's roster, if we played last year's schedule,
sure,
I would have Tennessee as like a 9 or 10 win team.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
So yeah. All right. Next segment here is questions on college football. The question tonight, we're going to get more specific to this season as we approach the upcoming season, which is a month away. The question tonight is, which Group of 5 team is most likely to make the college football playoff this season? I put this question there for Joe, who abandoned us. Group of 5 Joe, as he's come to be known. So Joe, this is for you, bud. Nick, which Group of 5 team is most likely to make the college football playoff this season?
Yeah, I think there's a good case for pretty much any of these teams. I mean, some of these teams have the pedigree. It's kind of hard to bet against them, like James Madison and Boise State. Obviously, probably has the greatest pedigree of all these teams.
Yes.
I'm going to stay away from USF just because they lost a great coach. It's going to be a first-year coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with UNLV.
UNLV, wow. Is that Barry Odom still? Is he the coach there?
No, that is our
guy Florida's old coach, Dan Mullen.
Our guy from Mississippi State, Dan Mullen. Yeah. He's been there a few years. I think he returns a lot on this team. I was actually reading about them the other day before knowing this was our question. And so they seem to have a lot coming back. That's a very winnable conference. They were pretty decent last year. Dan Mullen's a good football coach, regardless of his woes at Florida. So I'm going to go UNLV.
Yeah. I think that's a good pick. UNLV has the 4th best odds, by the way, to make the college football playoff from Group of 5 teams. The obvious choice here is basically like they have to prove that they can't make the playoff. They're a team that should make the playoff based on their schedule, based on their talent. That's obviously Boise State. Boise State is the most likely team, I think. That would be my answer to the question. But to not take the obvious answer, there's a sneaky case. I think this is more of a value pick is how I would describe it. So if you were going to gamble on this team, they're not in the top 5 in terms of odds. But I think this team has a shot to make the playoffs this year. And I'm making this pick in honor of Reed Bacon, which is the Memphis Tigers.
Okay.
I think Memphis has a pretty good schedule. I think that they could make the college football playoff this season. And so I would pick them just to be not obvious. Boise State, I think, is the obvious choice. Another team that neither of us have mentioned so far that I think has a great case is UTSA, the Roadrunners. I think UTSA is going to be pretty good this year. I think they have a favorable schedule. It feels like that's a team that could make a jump up. And you've already mentioned other good ones like James Madison, South Florida. South Florida, ironically, is top 5 in odds to make the college football playoff. And I would not expect them to make the playoff after losing Alex Golish and Byron Brown. I'd be shocked if
they're definitely going to have a drop off, right? Like that seems crazy.
Have to. Yeah, but top 5 odds for Group 5 team is pretty wild.
Interesting.
And I think that speaks to the amount of talent.
Yeah, given the roster that Alex Golish built. Yeah,
exactly. Given their situation, their recruiting, their resources, their all the things like the fact that he was able to build a program that's still top 5 in odds to make the playoff from a Group of 5 perspective. Even though he's not even there anymore, I think speaks to how good of a job he did there. And so, that's what I would go with is, like I said, is Memphis. I'm going to take a little value pick there. UNLV is a great pick, Nick. I forgot that Dan Mullen was their coach.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's interesting with these Group of 5 teams. You know, with UTSA and with USF, it always feels like there's some kind of second tier school in states like Florida and Texas that can just live off of all the best talent from their state that didn't go to like the 2 or 3 biggest schools and be like the best mid-tier team, you know, in their conference or whatever. And so it's not shocking, you know, like Central UCF was that for a long time. I think USF is kind of in most recent years kind of I think Golish has kind of stolen that thunder, but UCF was that for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
for like the last 10 years. And going back to Scott Frost and then our own Josh Heupel.
Yep.
And then is Gus Malzahn there now? Is he still there?
No, and it's not there anymore.
Yeah. So I don't know who's there.
Well, he might be. No, I think.
No,
I don't know.
I think he became an OC again somewhere.
Yeah, he's at
He's in the SEC again, right?
He's at Florida State. He's at Florida State because they beat Alabama.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's what Gus Malzahn does, is beat Alabama.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Yeah, so
the Gus bus.
Yeah, and Boise State feels like that as well. Except it's not just their state; it's so much. It's just like the Pacific Northwest. It's like if you're a pretty good player and you don't go to like Oregon or USC or
Washington,
one of the old Pac-12 teams, then like you can go to Boise State.
Yep.
So
yeah, I agree. Yep, I think that's. I think we made some good choices there. Again, UNLV fourth best odds, and Memphis I think is like around 6 or 7. Both those teams feel like great value picks if you're interested in betting on a Group of 5 team. Boise State, again, is super likely, so there is some
clear
value.
Favorite,
yeah, there is some value there, but I feel like being someone who does dabble in gambling, I would be happy to roll with UNLV or Memphis this year. So, all right. We're going to move on to the SEC Gauntlet. Tonight, we are covering Missouri and Oklahoma. We'll start with Missouri. Their over and under this year is 6.5 on wins. 6.5 for the Missouri Tigers. I'll run through their schedule real quick, and then we'll go game by game. So Missouri, on their schedule this season, has Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kansas, Troy, Mississippi State, Florida, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, and Oklahoma.
Okay.
So to start off, Missouri hosts the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff. Who you got in this one, Nick?
I'll take Drinkwitz to beat up on a bad team.
Yeah, that's times 2 there. All right, Missouri travels on the road to their. I think this is traditionally Missouri's like biggest rival across like school to school.
Absolutely,
they travel to Kansas to play the Jayhawks. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, this is interesting. It's a big rivalry game. It's just hard to pick Kansas in this game as much as I'd like to because I can't stand Eli Drinkwitz. So I'm going to take Missouri. But yeah, I think they call this the Border War. I think that's the name of that rivalry.
Yeah, I think so too.
Stems for a little history. Stems all the way back to the Kansas-Nebraska Act and John Brown and the
Kansas Nebraska or Kansas Missouri.
Sorry, Kansas Missouri. It was the Kansas Nebraska Act, but with Kansas and Missouri, there was competition between these states after the United States legislature passed certain laws about who could and couldn't be a slave state. And as a prelude to the Civil War, some people argue that the Civil War started in Kansas and Missouri. And so because there was a lot of fighting going on there, because it was based on popular sovereignty, which just meant they would hold a referendum to vote on whether this would be a slave state or a free state. So you had the most passionate people on both sides of the issue moving to these territories so they could vote. And when you get the most passionate people about an issue, of course, like slavery, moving to these places, it gets violent. Like John Brown, who was a martyr for the North and a criminal, basically a terrorist considered in the South. He was caught at Harper's Ferry trying to steal guns in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He was actually caught by Robert E. Lee. This was before the war, while he was still a colonel for the U.S. military. But John Brown was a guy that like led this slave revolt, and they were just like killing farmers. Not even all of them were slave owners, but they were just like kind of killing white farmers. And John Brown himself was white, but nevertheless, that's this rivalry. I say all that to say stems back all the way to like this dispute.
Wow!
And it's the Border War. So yeah, if anyone has ever seen the Outlaw Josie Wales, the Western, then that movie kind of centers around this conflict, like Missouri and Kansas, the Jayhawkers, and yeah. So, anyways, I'm the history guy. I like that kind of stuff. But yeah, the
Yeah.
border war is an underrated rivalry, I think. So.
For sure. So 2 questions. The first one is, I obviously could have guessed that there was a person in history named John Brown
Yeah,
because that name is common enough that someone would have existed with that name.
sure.
Was Denzel Washington's character in Remember the Titans
Yes.
referencing the
Yes.
person John Brown
Yes.
when he says, "I'll break my foot off in your John Brown hind parts"?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the significance of the hind parts there? Is that in relation to actual history or just a saying?
No, I think he was just saying he was going to break his foot off in Petey Jones' butt for fumbling the football. So
why his John Brown hind parts though? Why not his I don't know.
It's just like it's just a curse. It's like a byword. It's like
okay. Okay.
I think at one point in that film, also later, I think his wife is like, "Well, I'll be John Brown."
Yeah, she does say that.
Yeah. So it's just a saying. But yeah, John Brown. Okay. John Brown was like very, very famous and infamous, depending on your perspective.
Okay.
So
okay. The second question I have is, since while we're on history and you're obviously Civil War buff, was the bloodiest battle in the Civil War not the battle at Schrute Farms? Yes or no?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Everyone knows this. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I'm also going to take Missouri to win in this game, so that's 2 wins for Missouri here in the border. The battle for the border?
I think it's the border battle. I think it's a border war.
Border war.
Yeah.
Border war. Okay. All right. So Missouri's 2-0. After that, Missouri hosts Troy at home.
That's interesting. Troy's had some good football teams. I'll take Missouri.
Yeah, if this was baseball, I'd take Troy, but it's not baseball. So,
true.
Yep, that is 3-0 for Missouri across the board here on the podcast. The next week, Missouri travels to Starkville, Mississippi to play the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Nicholas, who you got in this one?
I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell.
Oh, my gosh. This man is doubling down on Mississippi State in this game. Yeah, we just picked Mississippi State in the last episode. Every single person picked Mississippi State to win this game except for me. I took Missouri on the Mississippi State side of the schedule.
Are you hedging your bet?
Going to take Missouri again on the Missouri side of the schedule. So I'm a believer in the drink.
I'm circling this game.
Yeah, we're going to be texting each other during this game. Oh, geez. Yeah. If Jeff was here, he would obviously take Mississippi State.
Well, clearly, he thinks they're going to be in the college football playoff. So
yeah, 10-2. 10-2 is what he had Mississippi State at. So it's crazy. All right.
Does he watch one YouTube video?
The following week, Missouri hosts Florida at home. Who you got in this one, Nick?
I'm going to take Florida strictly on talent.
Okay, that's a good pick. The last time when we picked Florida's schedule, it was just me and Jeff, so you didn't have anybody in that game. I took Florida to lose against Missouri on their half of the schedule. I'm going to hedge myself here, and I'm going to take Florida to win. So that's 2 wins there two losses there for Missouri. Yeah, hedging my bet there. I kind of had this one circled as it could go either way, and so sure. I knew I was going to pick, 2 different sides. But anyways, the next week, Missouri hosts Texas A&M.
A&M.
Yeah, I'm taking A&M as well. The following week, Missouri travels to Ole Miss. Who you got in this one?
Ole Miss.
I'm also taking the Ole Miss Rebels to beat Missouri. So that's 2 losses for Missouri. They have a bye week after that before they travel to Arkansas, to Fayetteville. Who you got?
Probably Missouri. I'm going to take Missouri.
I'm also riding with the Tigers in this one. The following week, Missouri comes back home and hosts Texas at home. Who you got?
No chance Missouri wins that game.
Yeah. I'm going Texas in a victory, so that's 2 losses for Missouri. After they host Texas at home, they travel to Athens to play the Georgia Bulldogs. Who you got in this one?
The Bulldogs.
Yeah.
That's a tough road to hoe for drink right there.
It is. After that, we've got Kentucky at home for the Tigers. Who you got in this one, Nick?
I respect no one less than Kentucky right now. I'll take Missouri.
I'm going to take Missouri to win in that one as well. So before we pick the last game, I have Missouri at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have them at 6 and what would be 5 with one game left. You have them at one game worse, so you have them at 5 and 5, 5 and 6 going into this game. So 5 and 6 for you, 6 and 5 for me. They in their last game of the season will play Oklahoma at home. Nick, who you got in this one?
The Sooners.
The Sooners. I'm very tempted to take Missouri in this game. Just full cards on the table. I really think Oklahoma is. I think so. First of all, I think Oklahoma, as you'll see in just a minute, I think they have. I really like John Mateer. I think John Mateer is a good quarterback. I'm a little higher on him than most of our friends. I think that Oklahoma is going to be potentially better than advertised this year, even though that everyone's kind of down on them, even though they're a playoff team last year. But it's just, I don't know, man. At this point in the season, I think it matters more what Oklahoma has done and less about who Missouri is. So if Oklahoma's had a great year, I don't think Missouri has a shot in this game. But if Oklahoma's had a bad year, I could see it being a very, very close game. All that to say, I'm going to go ahead and take Missouri to lose, as you did in this one. So that puts our final tallies. Nick, you have Missouri at 5 and 7. And I have Missouri at 6 and 6. Both of those records for those both of those are under their win total for the season. So the Valda podcast has Missouri at under. Nick, do you think that that Jeff would have them on the over?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I would not be shocked if Missouri wins 7 games. I'll say that.
I mean, I could see a path to it for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's off the table. I don't think they will, but I would be like, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing.
Here's the issue with their schedule. Before the bye week, they have these 3 games in a row: Florida, A&M, Ole Miss. That feels like 3 straight losses, maybe 1 win against Florida on the front end. After their bye week, they have Arkansas, Texas, Georgia in that order. Now, Arkansas I don't think is going to be very good, but it is on the road. And then you've got Georgia and Texas, or Texas and Georgia in that order, back to back. So that feels like it could be 6 straight losses in the middle of their schedule.
Sure.
And
who knows how you respond to that once you get on the other side of those 6. I mean, the Wills it really could go either way for them. If they can win a couple, like if they can beat Florida and Arkansas, then I think they can definitely be a 7-win team. If they lose those 6, like the wheels could totally fall off. I mean, they could it could be a 4 or 5-win team. So
absolutely. All right. Well, we'll move on to Oklahoma. Oklahoma's schedule reads as University of Texas, El Paso, Michigan, New Mexico, Georgia, Texas, Kentucky, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Florida, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Missouri to end the season for Oklahoma. We'll start at the top here, Nick. In the first game of the season, Oklahoma hosts UTEP at home. Who you got?
I got the Sooners.
Yes, times 2. Then they travel to Ann Arbor to face the Michigan Wolverines. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, this is a big early game, big Big Ten SEC matchup. I'm kind of with you. I think John Mateer is really good. I wonder if he'll be able to stay healthy. But I do think he'll be healthy for this game. It's in Ann Arbor. That's a tough place to win. I think I'm going to go Michigan.
Yeah, Oklahoma won this game at home last year.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it off of the amazing play of John Mateer. John Mateer was good, but they really just ran the ball down Michigan's throat the whole game.
Yep.
And so
they had a really good defensive unit too.
Yes, so. I think that it's going to be another low-scoring, heavy defense, heavy run, and I think this year with Xavier Hyder, that favors Michigan. So I'm going to take Michigan to win in this one as well. So that's 2 losses for Oklahoma. The following week, they come back home and they play New Mexico. Times 2?
Times 2.
That is 2 wins for Oklahoma. The following week, they travel to Athens to play Georgia.
Yeah, they can't beat Georgia in Athens.
No. All right, here is where Oklahoma's schedule is super interesting. So they've played 4 games. Then they have their bye week after 4 games, and they've only played 1 quality SEC team and 2 quality opponents in total. They very easily, and we both have them, could be 2-2 going to their bye week, and then they have 8 straight games after that. So the first game out of the bye for Oklahoma is neutral site against Texas for the Red River Shootout, as it will be called on this podcast.
Correct. That's what it is.
The Red River Shootout. Who you got in the shootout, Nick?
Man, I think these teams will actually be pretty even this year. I think Texas might be overlooking a 2-2 Oklahoma team. And I think coming off a bye week that Oklahoma is going to beat Texas.
Well, I hate to hear you say that because I also was going to take the upset in this one. And I was really hoping we'd get some disparity here because of that. I just feel like the team that's supposed to win this game never
wins.
Does.
Sure.
Yeah. And so Texas obviously should win this game. I think Texas is the best team in the SEC. They're not going to be undefeated. You're not going to be undefeated in the SEC.
Do you think Texas is better on paper than Georgia?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. You think Arch Manning's better than Gunnar Stockton right now?
I do.
Really?
I think in their system.
You think he will be better this year?
I think he's the better player, is how I would say it.
Okay.
I think he'll have a better NFL career. I think he's got more talent. I think now in this season specifically, Gunnar Stockton has more things around him in terms of, he's been in the system for a long time. The coaching staff loves him. He's a Georgia guy playing for his home school. He has a lot of things that are going his way. So I do think Gunnar Stockton at the end of the year, you could look back on the season and be like, he had a better season than Arch Manning, but I don't think he's a better player.
That's fair. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's interesting. I think Georgia's the most complete team. I think, though, that this is like make or break for Stark. Like, it feels like if Stark can't maybe not even necessarily win a natty, but like be knocking on the door with this team, that like it just won't happen.
I agree with you, but I'm going to say it's championship or bust for Texas.
Okay, yeah.
And bust doesn't mean Stark's getting fired. I think if Stark makes the playoffs and win, I think, frankly, if Stark makes the playoffs.
If he doesn't win a championship, then when is he going to win one?
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Texas fans are all in on a championship this year. And if they don't win one, it's a failure. That's what I think.
Gosh, I hope they're disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing makes me happier than seeing all these fans go home disappointed.
That's right.
That's a deep cut for Tennessee fans
out
there.
It still hurts.
Champ, you can kick freaking rocks.
Still hurts.
Oh God. All right.
I was campaigning for that guy to be our defensive coordinator in the offseason.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? He's very good at his job. Very good at his job.
Yeah.
All right. The next week, Oklahoma comes back home, truly, after being at the Red River Shootout, and they host Kentucky at home. Who you got in this one?
This is a trap game after they beat Texas, but the good news for Oklahoma is they could show up for the last 4 minutes of this game and beat Kentucky. So, Sooners.
That's right. I'm taking the Sooners as well. The following week, they travel to Mississippi State.
Yeah, Oklahoma's going to win this game. I think it'll probably be closer than it should.
I'm with you. Not a lot. We have literally picked every game the same so far.
Okay.
The next week, Oklahoma hosts South Carolina at home. I'll go first on this one. Maybe it'll mix up the mojo.
All right, go ahead.
Oklahoma hosting South Carolina. This is Halloween night in Norman. There is no way in heck that South Carolina comes in there and wins that game. I got Oklahoma.
I agree.
All right. Wins times 2. All right. The following week, Oklahoma goes on the road to Florida. Who you got?
This is interesting. Florida is going to have a good roster. I think this could be Oklahoma riding high. They've won a few games. They're feeling good. I think this could be a trap game. We've been to the Swamp. It's not the most intimidating place in the world, but it's not like it's an easy place to play. I think it would be silly if we said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still think Oklahoma's going to win this game. Hard to pick them.
Yep.
Hard to pick Florida.
I picked them on the Florida side, and I'm picking them again. Oklahoma wins this game. The following week, Oklahoma hosts Ole Miss at home.
Sooners at home.
Gosh, Nick, you know I'm down on Ole Miss. Why couldn't you just take Ole Miss? Oh my gosh. You know what? Screw it. I'll take Oklahoma, or I'll take Ole Miss. Screw it.
I've single-handedly turned back around on Ole Miss on this podcast. Yeah. You heard it here, folks.
What the heck, dude? Like, I don't even know. All right, fine. The next week,
I'm just picking what I think.
Oklahoma stays at home to play Texas A&M. Who you got in this one?
Let's see.
Now, this is after Texas A&M hosts a very formidable opponent in the Tennessee Volunteers at home. So Texas A&M's coming off a grueling loss.
You're saying that tongue in cheek, but we're not going to be an easy out, even if we don't have a great year. So.
No, we're not going to be an easy out. We're just going to be an out.
Yeah, probably. So what do I have Oklahoma at right now?
You have Oklahoma at losing 2 games, and at this point in the season they've played 10. So you've got them at 8-2 right now.
I've got them at 8-2. But
they've already hit the over.
But they've won 4 in a row.
They've won 5. They've won 6 in a row for you.
They've won 6 in a row for me.
Yep.
I've got them winning 6 in a row. I think they're riding high. Where's this game?
It's in Norman. Yep.
I just think A&M's going to take a step back, bro. I'm picking Oklahoma.
All right, there's some more discrepancy there. I'm taking Texas A&M in this. I think Texas A&M is the real deal. All right, last game of the season, Oklahoma travels to Columbia, Missouri to face the Tigers. We both picked Missouri to lose this game minutes ago. Who you got?
We're both still going to pick Missouri to lose this game.
Yeah, I got Oklahoma in this one. All right, let me tally these up. We got Nick with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 wins for Nick Duncan on the Oklahoma Sooners schedules. That's 10-2 for Nick. I've got them losing 1, 2, 3, 4 games. I've got them at a much more modest 8-4. Both of us are still on the over, though. So that's a 9-win average for the Sooners, which is a game and a half above their over and under win total. Yep. Nick, hearing 10-2, hearing the 7.5 over under win total, do you feel confident about that?
Hearing it read back, I probably feel better at 9-3, but I do think that they're going to be. I do think that they're not getting the love that they deserve after being a playoff team and John Mateer being hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to shock me if Oklahoma goes back to the playoff. I think they're a good football team.
John Mateer was the Heisman favorite when he got hurt.
That's right.
I think he's really good. I would not be shocked if they win more than what I picked them to win, which is still the over. So I feel I would be a little bit worried betting on the Missouri under. I would not be worried betting on the Oklahoma over.
Yeah, I agree.
So
totally agree. Missouri's much closer to that number. I'd be more. I feel like Oklahoma should be at 8.5.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for that for sure. I guess the biggest question marks are the defense, just because they lost some pieces from last year.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, their head coach is, what's his face?
They've got talent, and it's Brent Venables.
Brent Venables. Thank you. Yes. So. I mean, I just don't see their defense being bad, and if the defense is the question mark, then that gives me a little bit more hope.
And even if this defense isn't as good, if John Mateer's healthy, I think this team might be better than last year's team.
Yeah, they definitely could be. Definitely could be. All right, that's it for Missouri and Oklahoma. So you've got the under for Missouri, and you've got the over for Oklahoma, according to the Volatile Podcast. I'm sure we will be deeply wrong about this in a few months when we figure out what actually happens. We're going to transition now to Rocky Top Roots. Nick, what are we talking about tonight?
Tonight we are talking about one man. We are talking about one man who played football for our beloved Vols in the late 60s under Coach Doug Dickey, 1967, 1968, 1969. That was his sophomore, junior, and senior years. Until the 70s, freshman could not play varsity football. So he was on the Tennessee freshman team in 66. But he was a starter in 67, 68, and 69. Was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. Served a brief stint there before going back to his hometown of Oliver Springs in East Tennessee. For the listeners, Oliver Springs is a little sleepy town on the border of Roane County and Morgan County in East Tennessee, just outside of Oak Ridge. And his name is Gary Chris.
Okay.
Chris is spelled Kreis. This will probably be the deepest cut, the least known portion of Tennessee football history that we talk about this year. The listeners probably haven't noticed, but I will now draw their attention to something that you noticed before we started the podcast, which is that I'm not wearing a Tennessee hat today.
First time.
First time. I'm wearing an orange hat with a black C. It is not a Chicago Bears hat. It is a Coalfield Yellow Jackets hat.
So wait, just for the listeners, so we can be clear.
Yeah.
This is the Coalfield Yellow Jackets, but the hat is orange and black?
Absolutely. As the Lord intended. As the Lord intended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the inside joke here is that I graduated from Coalfield High School in East Tennessee, which is in Morgan County, and we were and we are the Yellow Jackets, but our colors are orange and black. So Mac likes to give us a hard time because of that, because it's it's crazy, but
it's a little crazy.
It's a little
Why
crazy.
not just the orange jackets? Why not?
I don't know. It works for us. Our yellow jacket is like the Yellow Jacket logo. When I was at Coalfield, I actually don't know if it's changed, but it looked like the Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket, except it was orange and black. Yeah, it was orange and black, and our C looks like the Chicago Bears C. So,
or the Cincinnati Red Sea. It's more of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, similar as well to the Cincinnati Red Sea.
It's like the old Red Sea, the original. It's like a wider. The Bears have the wider gap between the top and the bottom of the sea, and the Reds used to have that, but they kind of shrunk it over time.
We also had a football helmet that was like the Michigan Wolverine football helmet, but it was orange and black. So we got lots of weird.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's kind of cool, though.
It was cool, but we got lots of kind of weird stuff. So it was all black. And then like the kind of the Wolverine marks were like orange.
With the,
yeah. So the reason why Coalfield is coming into it is because Gary Chris was my high school football coach. He was the football coach at Coalfield. He was an assistant after he came back home from the 49ers. He was there very briefly. NFL wasn't for him, is what he would used to tell us. And he came back to Oliver Springs, and he coached middle school football in Norris, which is a small town in Anderson County. Did
I say it like that?
Say it like what?
Norris,
yeah.
I thought it'd be Nars.
Yeah. I'm sure there are people that say Nars. Norris is between kind of Oak Ridge and Oliver Springs area. And he coached middle school there for a little bit, and then he became the assistant coach at Coalfield in the early 80s, and he was the assistant coach for 7 years. Then he became the head coach, and he was the head coach for 21 years.
Wow.
At Coalfield. He retired in 2008, a year after I graduated high school, and he actually got diagnosed with cancer in 2016, and he passed away about a year later. So Coach died in 2017. He was 69, I think, maybe 70. But some things about Gary Chris and why we're talking about him, because he was an important part of Tennessee football history. So he was nicknamed High Pockets. Everybody called him High Pockets because he always wore, didn't matter if he had a t-shirt on or a polo, he always had khaki pants on, and he had them tucked in, and he had his belt loop was like, his waistline was like at his belly button. Like he always wore his pants high. And so everybody called him High Pockets because his pants were always so high. Yeah. Old High Pockets. So if you look up his stats, you'll see him, his position as a wide receiver. But he actually, the way he would always describe it to us is he said he was called like an offensive end. And he would say it's not really a position. He said football changed so much, it's not really a position that exists anymore. But he would say it's like a tight end, like a prototype tight end kind of position. So he, running the football was the name of the game in the 60s. And so most of his time was spent blocking, but he also caught the ball quite a bit for that day and age. So he appeared in 30 games in his time at Tennessee. As a sophomore in 1967, played in 10 games. He had 6 receptions for 100 yards. It's an average of 16.7 yards a reception. No touchdowns. In 1968, played in 10 games. He had 25 receptions. That 1967 team won the national championship, by the way. He was on a national championship team with Doug Dickey. And in 1968, they won no championships, but he caught 25 footballs for 334 yards for an average of 13.4 yards per catch. He scored 4 touchdowns. And then in 1969, they did not win the national championship, but they did win the SEC championship. So he won 2 SEC championships playing football for Tennessee. And in his senior year, he caught the football 38 times, which was the most on the team. He caught 609 yards, 16 yards per average, which was the highest on the team that year, led the team in receptions and in receiving touchdowns that year. And so his career totals were 69 catches, 1,043 yards with a 15.1 yard average and 9 touchdowns. And he scored 54 career points. I couldn't find the context for this, but he also rushed the football once in 69 and had 6 yards. So I don't know if that was some kind of weird sweep or something like that. But his most notable single game performance was in 68, which is actually the year that they did not win a championship while he was there. He had 11 receptions against Kentucky and 110 yards versus Mississippi in 19. Sorry, the 11 catches versus Kentucky was in 69, but he had a 110 yard receiving game versus Ole Miss in 1968. And in 1968, he caught 334 yards, so a third of his yards came against Ole Miss in one game.
Dang.
And that was when Archie Manning was at Ole Miss. One coach went to UT. So in 67, they went 6-0 in the conference. They were recognized as the national champions. They did lose. They actually lost to Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl that year, but they declared the national champions before the bowl games. So Lichtgenhaus, they were the Lichtgenhaus champions that year, and that is a claimed national championship by Tennessee. 1968, they had a memorable tie versus Georgia. Coach caught a touchdown late in the game and then actually caught the 2-point conversion that tied the game towards the end of the game that kept them from losing. They were able to tie Georgia in 68 because of both those catches. And then in 1969, they were the SEC champions, and he was, of course, a key starter in 1969. So a couple other interesting things. In the 68 season opener versus Georgia, the game that they tied that I mentioned, they tied 17-17, where he caught the touchdown pass and a 2-point conversion. That was in Neyland Stadium, and that was on Tennessee's first game of the year, Tennessee's brand new AstroTurf. They had turf that year, and he was the first Tennessee player to ever catch a touchdown on artificial turf. So
nice.
Interesting thing. Another interesting fact is that he was a starting wideout on these championship teams alongside Lester McLean. So Coach played with Lester McLean. And for Vol fans that don't know, Lester McLean was the first African-American player to ever play at the University of Tennessee. So Coach Chris played with Lester McLean. And so that's just a little bit about Gary Chris. So that's kind of the gist of it. One interesting story. We've quoted this on the podcast before, but there's the quote from Moneyball where Billy Beane says, "I hate losing more than I like winning," and there's a difference. Mm-hmm. Coach Chris was that way. So Coach Chris grew up in Oliver Springs, played for Oliver Springs in high school before he went to play at the University of Tennessee. And interesting thing is that Oliver Springs is in Roane County, Coalfield's in Morgan County, but they're only like 15 minutes away. And they're bitter rivals. Like Oliver Springs was our biggest rival. And so Coach spent 28 years between being an assistant and a head coach coaching for his high school alma mater's most hated rival, which is interesting because his college football coach, Doug Dickey, played at the University of Florida coached at the University of Tennessee, won 2 SEC championships, won a national championship, and then left Tennessee to go back to Florida to be the head coach, and was never as good as he was at Tennessee. Like won 8 or 9 games maybe once, but most of those teams were like 4 or 5 win teams while he was at Florida. And then Doug Dickey is not anymore. I don't even know if Doug Dickey's living. I don't think he's the athletic director anymore, but it wasn't that long ago that he was the athletic director at Florida. So, but he's one of our national championship winning coaches. So it's just interesting comparison there. Coach Chris going home and coaching his hated rival. So I'll say all that to say, when I was a junior, my senior year, we went 10-0, and we played Oliver Springs and we beat them. We played them early in the season. My junior year, we went 9-1, and the one game we lost in the regular season was to Oliver Springs. And coach was notorious for like not showing up to teach or like work at school for like 3 days after a loss. Like he wouldn't show up until like Thursday, like Wednesday or Thursday after a loss. So like,
but he was at practice, baby.
Oh yeah, of course. And so like, I remember the Monday after we lost that game. He may not have even been at practice on Monday. I don't remember. The first practice he came back to, we didn't even hardly practice. He just like lectured us, which was really just him ranting about how much he hates losing. And I remember we were all in the bleachers of the stadium at Coalfield, and he's down giving us a speech, and he was standing next to a telephone pole or like a light pole for like the lights in the stadium. And he was so mad. He would like grit his teeth and just like rant. And he was like, I'd rather be strapped to that telephone pole and beat with a whip than to lose to Oliver Springs. He's like, I think he said, I'd rather be strapped to that telephone pole butt naked and beat with a whip than to lose to Oliver Springs. Because he hated losing to him so bad. He genuinely hated losing more than he liked winning. But he averaged 9 wins a season as a head coach over his 21 years. And we talked earlier about like coaches being like shapers of men, and coach was just a good guy. Everybody loved him. All his players loved him and always gave their best for him. And he was just probably what you think of as kind of like an idyllic high school football coach. And he was kind of, local royalty, having been on a Tennessee national championship team, of course. And I wasn't able to find anything that confirmed this, but coach also punted for Tennessee. That part I know for sure. But the rumor used to be from people around Coalfield was that there was a special celebration rule created when Coach Chris played at UT, because when he would score a touchdown, he would take the football and punt it into the stands. And
that's awesome.
They said that after I think maybe his junior year, they created, like the whole NCAA created a rule that was like the Gary Chris celebration rule, basically, that like you couldn't punt the football after a score.
That's awesome.
I was able to confirm that through research, but that was always at least a legend around town.
We're gonna assume it's true.
Yeah, I'd like to believe it's true. I'm glad I at least didn't find anything that told me it wasn't true. So
right, exactly.
So that's the Rocky Top Roots for tonight. Coach Gary Chris, and he was important to me in formative years, and a legend in East Tennessee, and one of those guys that not a lot of people probably in UT history know about, but played an important role on some important teams. So
yeah, Coach Chris walked so that '80s Miami Hurricanes team could run.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. The first thing that came to mind, Nick, when you were reading through this, you were talking about his career at Tennessee in the '60s and how they beat Ole Miss with Archie as the quarterback. That would have been the same upset game that you mentioned in our past podcast. That's right. Of where Arch basically had some words through press conferences with Steve Kiner. Is that right?
That's right. So in '67, they beat Ole Miss 20-7, and then he was also on the '68 team that got beat 38-0. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So he was in the locker room with Philip Fulmer and Steve Kiner and all those guys.
He played with Coach Fulmer. Yeah. Yeah. Coach Fulmer. Coach Chris always had all these tickets to UT games, and he would just give them to people all the time. And he was at every UT game, but he was always up in a box with his buddies and knew Coach Fulmer because they played together and stuff like that. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really cool connection, man. I had no idea that was your high school coach. That's crazy.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of anything else here. Did he coach your high school team? Like, obviously, it's what y'all single A high school
very
football.
small. Yep.
So I'm sure it was probably obviously super run heavy. Probably not. I mean, obviously different, but not like crazy different than the era of football he played in. I would guess, right? Did he kind of coach with the same philosophy that he played with?
We definitely ran the football more, but we actually threw it quite a bit for a single A school. Like we threw it much more. Again, this will be like probably teams and deep cuts and stuff that a lot of people don't know about, but you'll recognize the names. But like around that, when I was in high school, Greenback was really the only other single A school that we regularly played that threw the football a lot. When I was a sophomore, we still played a lot of the private schools because it was before the multiplier.
Right.
So the multiplier, for those that don't know, came in where private schools, like you're ranked single A through 5A based on your, and now it's 6, I think. But at that time, it was single A through 5A. You were ranked whatever level you were based on your enrollment. And that went it was just a 1-to-1 for everybody. And then after my sophomore year, they put in this thing called the multiplier, which for private schools meant you took your enrollment number, you multiplied it by 1.3. And whatever that number was how you got ranked. So a lot of the private schools that played with us after my sophomore year got bumped up. And so I say that to say, like some of those schools, would throw the ball more.
Right.
When I was a sophomore, we made it to the 4th round, which would be like the final 4 teams, semifinals.
Yeah, semifinal. Yeah.
And it was us, and the other 3 teams left were Donaldson Christian Academy and CAK and CPA from Nashville. So,
wow.
And all those teams moved up. So we lost to CAK in the regular season, and they threw it all over us, and then we beat them in the playoffs. So
I heard Donaldson Christian had like a pretty weak running back in the day. Is that true?
Yeah, he was pretty soft. I heard. Yeah,
that's what I've heard. That's just rumors. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know who that might be or anything like that. But I've just heard that
maybe someone could confirm that or deny it for us. So
yeah. I heard this guy was like so soft he like tried to be a cop and like couldn't even hack it and stuff like that.
Sorry, I think I said it was Donaldson, CAK, and CPA.
You said CPA,
yeah, that's wrong. CPA and Donaldson were there. We beat CAK in the 2nd or 3rd round. I can't remember. And the other team in the 4th round was Boyd Buchanan. So Boyd Buchanan beat us in the 4th round. And then I think Donaldson beat CPA, and one of those two, of course, won the championship. But all those teams moved up after that. But all that to say, all of the public schools around East Tennessee, we threw it more than most. We had a pretty good quarterback, and we would throw it around. So,
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, that's such a crazy connection, dude. Like the fact that you played for a national champion in high school. That's wild. My high school coach just like played at Monterey and like wanted to coach.
He was
not nearly as cool.
Yeah, but he was but in the same way, like he was a hometown guy, right? Like even though it was just down the road, like he was a hometown guy and loved his community, and everybody loved him. And after he retired, even the Oliver Springs people I think started to come back around and be like, yeah, we like Gary Chris, So Coach was funny. He had all these funny, like, he was old, so he had all these like boomer sayings that were hilarious, and he took very seriously the state of the field. So we had a practice field, of course, that we practiced on, and like nobody was allowed to be on the field during the week. And if he saw students out there, I mean, he would just lose it. He'd be like, "Get off my grass. That's the best grass in East Tennessee outside of Shields Watkins Field."
That's awesome.
And he was right. It was really it was immaculate. So
that's awesome. Did oh shoot, I'm blanking on my question now. Anyways, yeah, that's hilarious that he was so uptight about that. But I mean, it's good. I mean, you see a ton of high school fields that are in bad shape because of that. Yeah. So
he also never lost to Alabama in the 3 years he played.
Let's go.
Never lost to Alabama. Had a couple blowouts and won. I think in '68 maybe they won like 10-9. Like it was a kind of a mudslinging game. But his senior year, they won the SEC championship. Their only loss was that 38-0 loss to Ole Miss, and that loss probably kept them from being national champions that year because they won every other regular season game, but they lost to Ole Miss late in the year, and then they ended up going to the Gator Bowl and playing Florida of all people, and we lost the Gator Bowl 14-13 his senior year.
Brutal.
So they did not play. That was the only time Coach played Florida. They did not play regularly back then, but always played Alabama, and he beat them 3 times. So.
Oh, I remember my question. My question was, you said he had all these boomer sayings. Did he refer to players on the team as titty babies?
I don't remember that one. He had similar.
Okay.
He would regularly, like, if guys weren't showing enough fire or like passion, he would regularly tell people that they needed to, like, he'd say, and this is just, language warning if your kids are watching this, but he would be like, yeah, y'all better get the red ass before Friday night now. Y'all better get the red ass.
Oh, that's so funny. I love that. Yeah, the reason I asked about titty babies is because that was like a boomer saying from coaches when I had growing up, and I always loved it. It was so hard to not laugh when your coach is just letting you have it. He's like, "You boys are playing like a bunch of titty babies," and I just would lose it. I would just lose it and try to keep it together, but you just can't. It's so funny. And so now that I have sons, I can't wait till they're a little older because I'm going to be constantly calling them titty babies anytime that they do anything. Oh gosh, I love it.
I do too.
I love it. I'll have to pocket the red ass though. That's good.
Yeah. He would pull that one out. That was pretty regular. That was pretty regular. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for filling us in on Gary Chris there, Nick. That was a good story, good pull. Yeah, go ahead and tell them where they can find us, Nick.
You can find us on YouTube, and you can find us on X at volatile_1998. You can find us at the major platforms where your podcasts are found. Apple Music. You can find us on Spotify, and you can stick with us for more, as I've been saying, more good vibe summer until we get into the grind. Right. So you got about 5 more weeks.
That's right. We're staring down the tunnel, and just remember, it's terminal.